Hey there, Real Country. Bob Furr here. I'm your Tuesday host of the Marc McMain Show. Marc's out seeking to represent District 46 in the Georgia State Senate, so I'm filling in for him here. With me, as always, is the one and only Chastity Stewart. Hello, Chastity. How are you today?
Hi, Bob. I'm doing great. Thank you for the introduction.
We've also got a couple of great guests here today. Our theme today is over-under on military service. You'll see where I'm going with that shortly. I've gotten to know some really cool people since moving here, and these two are two of the coolest. And when I was looking for guests, I thought of them right away because I'm like, man, these guys got a face for radio.
They definitely are going to be awesome guests. I'm so excited.
So with us is Tom McNamara, decorated combat pilot, U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer 5, retired, and Stratton Hickey, Commander, U.S. Navy, retired, a former submariner.
Wow.
Don't meet one of those every day.
Fancy.
So welcome, guys. Good to have you here.
Sir.
So listen, before we get to the fascinating lives that these two guys have lived, what have you been up to, Chastity? Have you done anything fun since I last saw you?
Well, Easter. We celebrated Easter with the family. That was wonderful. Went to a beautiful church service. That was wonderful.
Awesome.
So, but no, I've not been in any B-52s or anything lately, so maybe that'll change today.
All right, well, let's get your pen and paper out because I
Okay.
got some stuff for you here. Spring has sprung, and so there are all kinds of things happening all over Georgia. I heard there's some kind of golf tournament in Augusta people are excited about. Something like that.
big.
But listen, Madison is where it is going down.
Yes.
So this Saturday is a second Saturday. There's a lot of fun stuff coming up. Saturday, April 11th, this Saturday is the second Saturday. So what they do, every second Saturday of the month, they put a fun twist on visiting downtown Madison, the shops, the stores, and everything like that. And so Saturdays is Masters on Madison, and you can play around, whichever way you want to look at it. But basically what you do is you get a punch card. You can get them at the Main Street office on Main Street. It's right next to the Visitor Center off the town square there in Madison. And what you're going to do is you're going to follow a course to different downtown establishments, and in each establishment you're going to get punched, or I should say you're going to get your card punched, and then when you bring it back you get a chance to win a really nice gift basket they put together. Madison's Open Container District will be open for the weekend for the special event, so Amici and Madison Produce both going to be able to give you the opportunity to shop, sip, and stroll as you go through this event. Another cool thing coming up, the Madison Youth Entrepreneurs Flea Market. This is a really great organization run by a woman named Mandy Reist. These are kids that are ages 5 to 18, and they're teaching them basic entrepreneurial skills. Like, for example, they just had a Young Bosses workshop where they taught them about branding and finance. And these are kids who are interested in going into business for themselves. I got to present there and hear them present their businesses, and it was really impressive. It's kind of a precursor to that Flex program they have at Morgan County High School, the Foundational Leadership Excellence, Entrepreneurial Excellence Program. We'll be talking about that a few Tuesdays from now. Next Saturday, April 18th, from 10 to 4, is the Madison Youth Flea Market. It takes place at the Madison Flea Market. That's at 1291 Eatonton Road in Madison, Georgia. You can't miss it. Big red building with a big red tricycle out in front of it. It's a chance to come by, see the kids, maybe buy some cool stuff, crafts, art, jewelry, treats. And if you have a budding entrepreneur, a child or young person in your house, 5 to 18, you can get them signed up. If they've got something they like to come out and sell, you can do it. This Saturday, however, is the last day to register. You just have to email, and this is a long one, Madison Youth Entrepreneurs @gmail.com. Or you can look them up, Madison Youth Entrepreneurs, on Facebook, or you can just call 706-818-4058. Then we have, coming up on the 25th, the first of Madison's what they call the Big Four events. Events are so important to Madison. They really do a great job with them in the city. I'm going to talk a little bit about that on the show coming up. They have a huge impact on the local economy. They have a huge impact on our sense of community. I'll tell you, I largely moved to Madison because of the Chili Fest. Like we were already looking at it. We were pretty close there, and I went to that Chili Fest, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. So Mad Fest is on April 25th, 10 to 4. It's on the town park, big space there. It's a free, family-friendly event. You can see the spring flowers, garden plants, handmade arts and crafts, crafting activities from various vendors, live music all day, 6 different bands playing throughout the day. They got vendor booths, local businesses, local foods, crafts, artists, fun activities for kids, some creative crafting. They're going to do a cool thing, safe solar viewing, where I guess you can look at the sun safely with an astronomist. And then they've also got a beer garden. There's a classic car show going on, Stratton. That'll probably get your attention, I would imagine. I know you like that. And then they have this thing called a plein air paint out, which the Artist Guild is putting on, which is basically when you paint outside, in the environment, and you kind of like, go in the moment type of thing. Then I might be doing trolley rides. We're trying to work that out. There's a lot of kids in the neighborhood, maybe not so much for the 90-minute history tour at 5 years old, but maybe get them a little trolley ride. We'll see if we can make that work. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to madisongeorgia.com/350/Madison Fest, or just look for Madison Fest on that site. Or you can contact Main Street Madison. They have a Main Street Madison, Georgia on their Facebook page, or just by going to mainstreetmadison.com. You can also email them at mainstreet@madisonga.com, or call them at 706-752-7997. And then, of course, big event coming up. 75 years ago, La Flora Garden Club started the Tour of Homes. That's coming up Friday, May 15th and 16th from 10 to 4 p.m. On the tour, when I take people around on the trolley, they're always like, well, can we go inside these homes? I'm like, well, yeah, but you'll get arrested. Oh. They're all private homes, but twice a year, many of the people generously open their homes. It's a fundraiser for the Historical Society and the Cultural Center. There's 8 homes on the tour this year. I know Boxwood is one of them. That alone is worth the price of addition. Magnolia House, Echo House, which is a really cool little house. It was built by one of America's very first female architects, a woman by the name of Sarah Ross Wilburn. And then you, of course, can go to the historic homes that are always on tour. I'll be driving around. It's a walking tour, but I'll be driving people around on the trolley. You can get more information on that at www.mmcc-arts.com. So that's what's going on. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show on WMOQ, Real Country 92.3 on your FM dial. Bob Furr filling in for Marc, and I'm about to introduce you to 2 of the coolest people I've met since I've moved to Madison. So let's go in order of arrival in Madison, I think, is how I'll start the lineup here. So we'll start with you, Stratton. Before we get into any depth about your life as a submariner, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I'm back on it. Can you see that? Yeah.
I love that.
Just tell us a little bit about yourself, Stratton.
Sure thing, Bob. My background in Madison is an interesting one because my dad was career Air Force. So although my family's been in Madison since the 1820s, as a child, I just grew up visiting Madison either in the summer or at Christmas. My father's grandmother and his mother both lived in town, and my mother's parents both lived in town. So I would come and visit them at Christmas and during any summer holidays. And so I got to meet people, including people my age, starting in the early 60s. So when I finally retired from the Navy, because I spent 22 years in the Navy, and then a few years as a contractor in the Washington, D.C. area, I came back to Madison and knew quite a few folks from my early days, plus when my dad retired from the Air Force, he moved back to Madison in the early 70s, and I had my senior year of high school here. So I'm a graduate of the Morgan County High School, and then went off to the Naval Academy for my 4 years of college education.
And your dad didn't just serve in the Army Air Corps. I did a little reading on him. He flew just about everything during World War II, fighters, right? And I was amazed at the number of different aircraft listed that he flew. Yeah,
and I'm sure it was a bit of a brainwashing process, although he never advocated me going into the military. He showed me pictures of the airplanes that he had flown and talked about some of the things he had done while he was on active duty. He started, of course, in Athens. He actually learned to fly as a private person before World War II started. He enlisted in the Army before the war started, and then when the war broke out, he went into the Army Air Corps through the cadet program, aviation cadet program, and wound up flying P-39s and P-40s down in Panama, and then transitioned to P-47s in Europe, flying close air support for General Patton as they went through France and Germany towards the end of the war. And my dad was there at the end of the war and then part of the occupation force in 1945 before he came back to the United States and continued flying.
Yeah, hard to see where you would have picked up an interest in serving in the military after that. Now, they have a saying in Madison, Chastity, that in order to say you're from Madison, you have to be 4 deep in the cemetery, meaning 4 generations of your family So even though you'd been moving around, I'm guessing you're still qualifying.
I think we're at 8.
Yeah,
Yes,
8. So pretty good there. Hey, real quick before we go over to Tom, so you just had your home on the Tour of Homes.
That's right.
During the holidays. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
It was a little strange because I used to do the tour of homes with my parents at my father's family home, which was on Old Post Road, and it was built in 1822. And it was a very historic home that really hadn't been changed much over the years, so I was very used to doing a classic historic home tour. And a few years ago, I wound up selling the home as my wife got ill, and I didn't have time to maintain 2 homes in Madison. So when this tour came up, the director of the Historic Society mentioned that she needed people, and I said, well, my home's 100 years old, but I said, it's not all that architecturally significant, but I am a collector. Maybe folks would be interested in that. And so we wound up opening the house up, or I wound up opening the house up, and my car barn, too. As you mentioned earlier, I'm a car guy, so I have garage space for 7 cars, and then I have room for lifts so I can put in a few more cars. So I have a small car collection, and then I collect jukeboxes, and a lot of people found that interesting since nowadays you don't see them very often, and I have 5 different jukeboxes. So that's what really the draw was, not so much the house, but it was more of an interesting tour for folks that liked collectibles.
But the house is historic, right?
It is 100 years old. My mother grew up in the house. It's where she was raised, and it's been in the family for the last 100 and couple years now. So it is historic, but I was so used to homes being even older and more architecturally significant. We have what's called a Georgia cottage, I believe is what Ken Coker told me it was. 1.5-story home, wood frame. So not remarkable from the street, but we renovated it when we came back to Madison. In fact, I had to jack the whole house up and dig under it to put in a basement so I could have room for all my collectibles. And then we lowered the house on the new basement and added a little at the back, too. So it's a pretty good size now.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. And Tom, you're new to Madison, but not new to Georgia. Tell us a little bit about your background and the road that led you here.
Sure, Bob. Thanks for having us today. It's a joy to be here with Stratton and share our experiences. Yes, we moved back to Georgia several years ago from Arizona. We were out there, my wife and I, Diane, for 14 years. We had some property there, and the reason I was out there was my job as an FAA aviation safety inspector took me to Arizona. But with retirement on the horizon, we thought we needed to get back to family back here in Georgia. So we started looking around, and you're right, we were not strangers to Georgia. I was based here as an Eastern Airlines pilot out of Atlanta, and I flew 20 years out of Dobbins Air Reserve Base with the Georgia Army National Guard. So we're well familiar with it, and one thing we did not want to do is move to Atlanta. So we knew about Madison. We took several trips back here scouting around, and just love Madison. So we purchased a house here and love it.
And that house has some history, too, to it. Built in 1920, I think, and
yes,
had a famous resident?
Yes, it had actually several. It was built, you're right, in 1920. It's a Craftsman. It was built by the Chief of Police, C.E. Elder, who was a Chief of Police of Madison for over 30 years, actually. When he died in 1937, a very prominent attorney in town, Felton Jenkins, and his family is still here. They purchased the house. I think it was 1944. They purchased the house. So we feel very fortunate. We love the house. It's just a jewel for us.
Awesome. Well, you're listening to the Marc McMain Show on Real Country Q92.3. I'm Bob Furr, filling in for Marc. We're talking with Stratton Hickey, a former submariner with the U.S. Navy, and Tom McNamara, a former pilot with the U.S. Army. We're going to dive into some commercials and then fly right back for the rest of our show.
Recently, I was on a flight writing on a legal pad, and the man next to me struck up a conversation. "Are you an author?" he asked. I said, "No, I'm actually a preacher." Well, the look on his face was priceless. How would you feel if you're stuck sitting next to a preacher for several hours? Surprisingly, though, we had a good conversation. He asked me several questions about Jesus, and I told him that the Bible says if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, Christianity is worthless. Ever thought about that? You see, the truthfulness of Christianity hinges on whether Jesus died and rose from the grave. There's great evidence for it, and I'm one of the billions of Christians around the globe who believes that the resurrection really happened. If Jesus did conquer death, then he's worthy of your trust. If he didn't, reject him because he's a fraud. I believe he really conquered death. What do you believe? This is Brian Wright, speaking right from my heart.
For devotions, visit rightfromtheheart.org.
The Madison Trolley Company is Morgan County's newest 5-star attraction. We offer historic Madison tours year-round, a haunted history experience in the fall, and our Madison Lights Christmas Tour and Mary Maddie Express Adventure for kids have become new holiday traditions. Our private charters add vintage charm to weddings and special occasions aboard a historic trolley by day, party trolley by night. Find us on the Madison Town Square or get on board by visiting madisontrolley.com or calling us at 706-997-1800.
When you walk through the doors of Campton Restaurant, you're not just here for a meal, you're part of a tradition. I'm fourth generation owner Josh Parker, and for nearly 40 years, families in Walton County and surrounding areas have gathered around our tables to share stories, laughter, and good Southern cooking. From crispy fried chicken to heart-healthy daily specials, there's always a plate waiting with your name on it. We're open Tuesday through Thursday from 11 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. and 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays. So come on by, make yourself at home, and experience Campton Restaurant, where family tradition meets every meal.
Are you looking for new tires? Well, look no further than Madison Car Care. They have the largest selection and you'll always get the best price. They also handle a wide range of auto repairs, from the small things like oil changes and wiper blades to the big things like suspension, parts, and radiators. They offer all kinds of accessories, from toolboxes to bed covers, side steps, and they even install those awesome ranch hand bush guards. Give them a call at 706-342-4774 or stop by at 1040 Confederate Road in Madison.
Welcome back, Real Country. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show on WMOQ 92.3 on your FM dial. I'm Bob Furr filling in for Mark. We are hearing from Stratton Hickey about life as a submariner and Tom McNamara about life as an Army pilot. So as we go forward, I guess now we'll switch and go in order of service time, and let's go with you. So, Tom, walk us through your life journey that led you up to the day you showed up at the U.S. Army. Like, you know, Ruby's got, I learned from my uncle, he's got a really interesting story about how that happened. He knew he was going to be drafted, and so but he wanted to serve anyway, and so he enlisted in the Navy. And he got home from his college graduation, and there was a letter in his mailbox from the Army drafting him. And so he went down to the office, and he said, "Listen, sir, I'm happy to serve, but I've already joined the Navy." And the guy goes, "Did you take the oath?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "Welcome to the Army." You know. So tell us your story about how you ended up in the Army.
Well, it started, the first memory I have of wanting to fly, I was probably 10 years old. And I distinctly remember sitting cross-legged in my bed at night, facing my iron headboard and flying the bed. So I would reach up and flip switches and push buttons and move levers and fly it. I remember doing that. Fast forward a couple of years, I got my first airplane ride in the front seat of a small airplane. Loved it. And then I just kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do. So fast forward 1968, the height of the Vietnam War. I was a sophomore in college. And the Army had a program where you did not have to have a degree to be a pilot. And I thought, I really want to do this. So I had a deferment. You know, I could have stayed, but the calling was just too great. So I went and talked to the recruiter. He explained the program. I took the aptitude test. I took the physical, and everything worked out really well. I was given a class date for flight school. I went to basic training at Fort Polk, and then from there on to Fort Walters, Texas for primary helicopter training.
I was wondering where that was going to go because, I mean, when you have a dream of flying, the Army's not the first thing that comes to mind, although a lot of people don't realize that the Army was the first Air Force. All through World War II, it was the Army Air Corps, and then that broke off, became the U.S. Air Force. I guess about 1948, like right 47, yeah, right before the Korean War. So I had a friend, by the way, who chose the Army because he wanted to be a diver, which I found equally counterintuitive. So speaking of the Navy, Stratton, tell us about your road. How'd you end up? You mentioned something about being an accidental submariner. I'm anxious to hear that story.
That's right. I had always planned on being a pilot, and I'm envious of Tom for his success in making it into the pilot corps. But when I was coming up, I lived in Colorado Springs near the Air Force Academy, and I was sure I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. My brother wanted to go into the Air Force, and he, in fact, did while we were there and became a pilot. My father had, as I say, spent 30 years in the Air Force and flew quite a number of aircraft. And then we moved to Georgia, and my senior year was here, and I thought, I want to outdo my brother and my father. I'm going to go to the Naval Academy and get carrier qualified, go through and get carrier qualified with aircraft. So I got appointments to both Air Force and Navy and decided to go to the Naval Academy and got up there, and it turns out they give you a physical right before your Christmas break when you come home for the first time. And they called me back after the physical and said, we need to have you take a test again. I took it again. They called me one more time and said, we need to have you take it just one more time. And it was called the Phalant Light Test. And it turns out it's these colored lights that test your vision in the color ranges, the acuity of color vision. And they said, sorry, you keep missing one more than you're allowed. You're legally colorblind. You can't fly. And at that point, I was crushed. I didn't know what I was going to do because it was my one and only goal was become a Navy pilot. As I was at the academy, I learned about what some of the other options were, and it turns out that I could have gone into the Marine Corps. I didn't want to be at the tip of the spear quite that much. I could go into several other corps, including the JAG Corps, the Intelligence Corps, Medical Corps, but my grades did not support that, and then the Supply Corps. And it turns out the Supply Corps you could specialize and support aviation or submarines or surface, or you could do a broad spectrum career. And so I opted for Supply Corps. And in fact, I spent one summer at the Naval Academy on the USS Daniel Webster out of New London, which was a ballistic missile submarine that was in there for some modified hull testing, and met the supply officer on the ship. He was an academy grad, colorblind, just like me, and it was one of those things that started me down the road of my submarine career after that.
That is a long gap between flying jets for the Navy and ended up under the water.
Yeah, just about the opposite.
Yeah. So you're listening to Mark McMain Show with Bob Furr, sitting in on Tuesdays on Real Country Q92.3. We're talking about the over and under of military service. Stratton with a great example of that there. We're talking with Army pilot Tom McNamara and Navy submariner Stratton Hickey. Take us to the next step, Tom. Tell us how you got behind the first time you got behind the controls of an aircraft, I guess, in Vietnam.
Well, actually, the first time I flew a helicopter was, as I mentioned, at the primary helicopter school at Fort Walters, Texas. So I soloed there, completed primary training, and then moved on to Fort Rucker for advanced training. And then shortly after graduation, I received orders to go to Vietnam as a UH-1 Huey pilot. So in January of 1970, I found myself a brand new W-1 co-pilot in Vietnam.
Just out of curiosity, what's that? So where were you when you got that word?
When I got orders?
No, yeah, you were in the U.S. still, right?
Oh, yes. I was actually, my class was deferred. It was the start of what they call Vietnamization, where we were turning the war over to the Vietnamese. So I graduated in August of '69, and our class was the first class to actually go stateside for a couple of months. So I was at Fort Riley, Kansas, Marshall Army Airfield, whenever I got orders. And my stint at Fort Riley was only about 3 months. So while I was there, I got orders to go to Vietnam.
So walk us through this, because I think this is kind of the little subtle things that people don't know. You're in Fort Riley, Kansas. Now you're going to end up in Vietnam. What are all the places and transports in between? How does one get from Fort Riley, Kansas to Vietnam?
Well, it was a circuitous route, for sure. From Fort Riley, Kansas, whenever it came time to leave, I went on Christmas leave, actually, and then I had to report to McChord Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. for a flight to Vietnam, and that was by way of Anchorage, Tokyo, and Cam Ranh Bay. So that was the route.
A few steps along the way. So now tell us a little bit about the life of a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, just the daily life. We'll get into the missions and all that, but like, how do you spend your days? What's the typical daily life of a helicopter pilot in Vietnam?
Well, I think it depends on the type of unit you were in. I was in an assault helicopter company, which pretty much tells you what you're going to be doing. So we flew combat assaults every other day, and on the middle day we flew general support. So our day would normally, depending on whether we're flying combat assaults as a unit or we're flying single ship general support, the day would start very early. We usually were off the ground by 7 in the morning, and that necessitated pre-flighting, briefings, coordination, and resolving any maintenance issues that you might have. And then we would depart on the mission and fly anywhere from 5 to 8 hours flight time a day. We would move troops from one point to the other, into landing zones, out of landing zones. If we're doing combat assaults, we would, on the days we're flying general support, it would be, you might be flying the chaplain, you might be flying a battalion commander, you might be flying donut dollies. You could be flying resupply for troops out in the jungle, water, sea rations, ammunition, whatever. So the pilots, there's 2 pilots in the aircraft, and we just took turns flying for 8 hours. We actually got very little nighttime when I was there, so we were usually back on the ground before dark, and get up the next day and do it all over again.
So you would not typically fly at night?
My unit did not.
Okay.
Yeah, and the combat assault companies that were almost, not entirely, but probably 90% daylight missions. We did have an aircraft. We took turns on medevac standby at night if we had to take somebody to the hospital over at Long Binh or something like that.
Gotcha.
But I got 966 combat hours in Vietnam flight time, and probably less than 10 night.
Wow. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show, Real Country. Bob Furr filling in here for Mark, who is seeking a seat in the Georgia State Senate. We're talking to Tom McNamara, U.S. Army retired, and Stratton Hickey, U.S. Navy retired. We're going to sail through some commercials, and we'll land right back here in our conversation.
Great job.
Pay-to-play, sweetheart deals, government land grabs, and a rigged gambling law. Corrupt career politician Burt Jones made a fortune in public office. But it gets worse. Now Jones is in the tank for illegal Chinese vapes. They're poisonous, they're addicting our kids, and President Trump issued a national order to ban them. But just like a career politician, Burt Jones ignored Trump's order and blocked legislation to stop the sale of illegal Chinese vape pens in Georgia. That's right, Jones ignored Trump and blocked the legislation to ban them right here in Georgia. Why? Because the Jones family is making big bucks selling the same deadly addictive Chinese vapes Trump banned in their gas stations. corrupt career politician Burt Jones. He sold out Georgia for Chinese vapes.
Paid for by Jackson for Governor, Inc.
Hey, this is attorney Bart Bitton with Bitton & Bitton. I live and work right here in Monroe, Georgia, and I am proud to serve this area. If you've been hurt in a car accident, you don't need some out-of-town lawyer that treats you like a number. You deserve a local lawyer you can trust, someone who lives here, works here, and takes care of people. So remember this, if you're ever in a car accident, be smart, call Bart. Bitton & Bitton, local lawyers you can trust.
Is technology giving you a tough time at your home or business? Don't worry, Big Mountain Computers is here to help. We're your local tech experts, now open in Madison. Our white glove service ensures personalized solutions for all your IT needs. Hardware fixes, remote support, private lessons, and more. Visit us at Madison Plaza across from Ingalls or call 706-343-4184 to schedule your consultation. That's 706-343-4184. Big Mountain Computers, turning your mountains into molehills.
Well, welcome back to Real Country, Real Country. This is Marc McMain Show with Bob Furr, guest hosting on Tuesdays. Alongside me, as always, is the unstoppable Chastity Seward. We're talking with Tom McNamara, U.S. Army retired pilot, and Stratton Hickey, U.S. Navy retired submariner. So before the break, we were going back and forth, like, submarines are such a unique thing, and I'm like, how do I ask the question? And Stratton just had a great line. He's like, there are so many things people find surprising about life on a submarine. Let's go with that, right? Like, what are the things that, over the years, when you've told people about what it's like on a submarine, that they've kind of found surprising?
Well, the first thing is when you volunteer for submarine service, you have to get screened. And the screening requires you to do things like escape training. And there are towers at various submarine bases that are big tubes of water, go up 150 feet or so, and they take you up into these towers, put you in a chamber. It's down at like the 100-foot level of water, and make sure that you don't panic as you have to put on an escape hood and rise that 100 feet in the tower to the top. So there are some certain things that you may get screened out for along the way. Once you finally get to your ship, you have to also begin a qualification process because the submarines have small crews. I was assigned to a ballistic missile submarine as my first submarine, crew of about 135 with only 13 officers. The nice thing for a supply officer, I was the only supply officer, so I was the department head on my first tour. But that didn't save me from the qualifications. I had to learn the entire ship in case there was an emergency. So you start to earn your dolphins learning every ship system, including the reactor compartment, how everything works in the way of pumps, electrical, battery, weapon systems. And it takes you 6 months to 8 months at least, usually, to learn the entire ship well enough to go on to another ship and have another commanding officer approve you for submarine dolphins. So you convince your boss that you're ready to go, and then he sends you to another commanding officer. That first time you're out, though, you're completely green, and they always love to do a couple of things to show you what it's like to be on a submarine. So when you go out, the ship transits for a ways, and it's like being in a tin can because on the surface there's not much stability. The ship rolls a lot. And that was another thing that actually screened out some people. If they got too seasick on the transit, they couldn't stay in submarine service. But once you dive the ship, it's very smooth. It's like being in an airplane, basically. You're very smooth. They have to test the ship after every upkeep to make sure you don't have leaks and things. So you go down in gradual steps. You go down to certain depths and you test various systems. As a junior officer, the torpedo men love to have the junior officers come up to the torpedo room because you have to, as you get to certain depth, check the outer doors and the inner doors of the torpedo tubes. And the only way to check the inner door is to have somebody crawl down that 21-foot tube to check and make sure there aren't any leaks, to make sure it's sealing up. And, of course, with the junior officer, as soon as he gets in there, they close the rear door.
Yeah,
and
I knew where that was going.
And it's a 21-inch wide tube, so you can't turn around. You've got to shimmy down to the end, check and see if there's any leaks, and then backwards shimmy back. And, of course, they've closed the door by that time, and you're in this black tube. And you can, by the time you get to the end, you can just about hear them laughing at you. But anyway, so that's one thing. And then as the ship goes deeper, they will tie a string from one side of the largest compartment to the other, and as the hull gets compressed as you go deeper, that string will actually sag. So as you get to your test depth, you'll see the string drooping. The actual depths of each submarine is test depth and crush depths are all classified. The crew will know that, but it's fascinating to know how much the ship will compress as it gets deep in the water. And then they start training you on all the systems. I was on a nuclear-powered ship, and so you have to learn the etiquette of going back to the nuclear compartment areas, and a lot of that was restricted until my clearances were at the right level, basically. And that takes several months usually because they do background checks on everybody. But there were certain areas of the ship I couldn't even go initially. The nuclear reactor compartment and the communications compartment because of all the things that were in those areas. But the torpedo areas was open, and surprisingly the missile tube areas were open. So you could go and walk through the missile launcher area and get familiar with all the systems that were there. The ship will run on a battery in emergency situations. And it's basically several hundred car batteries that are wired together. And they're in a very small compartment under some decks. And you have to go down once you've submerged the ship and make sure everything is working right. So you go down with a senior enlisted guy who's done it before. You have to take off everything metal that you're wearing on your uniform. You can't have zippers. So we wear Velcro coveralls that go down there. And you test and look at each battery cell to make sure it's not leaking, that it's properly connected. And you have to make sure there aren't any water intrusion leaks, because salt water hitting the electric circuits of a battery will cause a gas that's poisonous. So you're searching for water leaks, you're searching for battery leaks, and so quite a learning experience as you go down to learn all the things that can kill you on this submarine. But once you get familiar with it, you're pretty comfortable with things.
So how long is a submarine out typically on a mission from the time you leave port till you get back?
It depends on the type of ship. I was on a ballistic missile submarine, which was actually 2 crews. I was on the blue crew of the USS Alexander Hamilton. We would go out for about 3 to 3.5 months. We would come back, and we were refitting out of Holyloch, Scotland, which was a submarine base with a submarine tender. We would turn the ship over in the course of about 7 to 10 days to the gold crew, tell them what was broken, what needed to be reprovisioned, talk about all the systems that were working or not working that might require special attention, and then that crew would have a few weeks to fix everything they needed to fix, and they would go to sea for 3 months. And you would fly back to the United States with your crew, or you could take European leave. I was single in the early days of submarine duty, so I would take European leave, take that 3 months of pay that I just earned as an ensign, single ensign, go down to London and spend it in a couple of weeks there. It was a great time. So,
and how long? So ballistic missile submarine. How long were you under at a time? Like when you drop?
Essentially, when you go out, you're underwater 90% of the time. You go up for periscope observations, and you stick what they call a snorkel mask up to get in some fresh air and to vent the bad air, and also the mast lets you bring in air to charge your batteries. So you will run a diesel that will charge your batteries, and you will get air, and you'll also get satellite passes while you're at periscope depth. But you're always at periscope depth. For a ballistic missile submarine, the entire mission is to go out and hide.
Yep.
So you don't want to be on the surface at all. So you are assigned an operating area, you transit to that area, and it's the areas are all classified, but you go out and you just hide. You go at low speed, ready to launch at all times, and do your business.
That's crazy. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show with Bob Furr on Q92.3, talking with Tom McNamara, former U.S. Army pilot, and Commander Stratton Hickey, former Navy submariner. We're going to find out in a minute he did some other cool things with the Navy. Tom, let's come back to you. You mentioned you started to talk about some of the missions that you flew in Vietnam. What were they like? I mean, what would be a typical, to whatever extent you feel like, pick a mission, and how does it go down, and what are the things that people would be interested in hearing about that?
Well, Bob, like I said, the combat assaults were conducted as a unit, and there may be 7 or 8 helicopters in a flight, followed by another 7 or 8 composing the rest of the company. And we would go to a pickup zone and pick up the infantrymen. We would take them to a landing zone. Sometimes it was contested ground, so it was not unusual to go into what we'd call a hot LZ with hostile fire. And then we would probably shuffle back to the pickup zone to the LZ several times a day, bringing in more troops, extracting wounded, that sort of thing. On the other days, in between the combat assaults, I think I mentioned the general support. So that could be, like I say, any number of things, just supporting the mission.
So I'm going to make Tom a little uncomfortable here because I'm going to mention that Tom was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Now, this is the 4th highest award for heroism that you can receive in the armed service, and the highest award that is specific to aerial combat and heroism in the air. Just to paraphrase, it is awarded to those who distinguish themselves by heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. It recognizes actions involving dangerous, high-stakes combat mission and exceptional aerial skill. You received that award, I believe, in 1970 for evacuating wounded American soldiers under fire. First of all, congratulations. I don't know what the right word is even to say, but thank you for your service.
Yes.
Yeah. To whatever extent you're comfortable, tell us a little bit about that mission, and again, to only whatever extent you're comfortable.
Thank you, Bob. So on May 29th, 1970, in the vicinity of Tan Lin, although it was triple canopy jungle, I couldn't see the village, but I was flying one of the general support missions. I was flying a battalion commander and a staff, going on troop visits. So very, very routine day, like many other days that I had flown. We picked up the battalion commander. We're flying him to a secure area, probably a fire support base, and I was the aircraft commander. My co-pilot, Hal Burke, was flying with me, and en route to where we were taking him, we heard an explosion, and I immediately asked, and it wasn't from the aircraft, we could tell it was external, and I immediately asked my co-pilot, Hal, did you check artillery? We always checked artillery activity in the sector we were flying because you don't want to fly into an artillery strike. So he said, yes, there's no activity. So we looked around, we saw smoke cloud on the ground. So I asked the battalion commander on the intercom, he had a headset, I said, sir, do you have troops in the area? He said, yes, I do. I said, it looks like there's an explosion on the ground, and if you have a frequency, we can get you in touch and see what's going on. So he gave us a frequency. We went up the FM radio. We were able to make contact. The troops was a mechanized infantry unit in armored personnel carriers. One of them had hit a landmine, and they were in an active ambush. They had numerous casualties, and we were pretty much in a remote area at that time. And I calculated that it would take probably at least 20 minutes for a medevac to get there. So we elected to attempt an extraction of the wounded. So we did. We went in. We were able to identify enemy positions and direct friendly fire on that. We landed, got the wounded people on board. I think there were 3 or 4 severely wounded. And we were able to avoid enemy fire and extract them and get them to a medical facility.
Were you part of a flight of helicopters,
No,
or is this all by yourself?
All by myself, and I had no armed escort.
Men such as these, Chastity, huh?
Incredible.
Wow. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show with Bob Furr, Q92.3. We are going to take a quick break here. No fun dad jokes after that great story. But man,
dry the tears.
amazing,
That was
amazing.
Hey, this is Doug.
And this is Robbie.
We own and operate Foy Tree Service.
When you need tree cutting, stump grinding, lot clearing, mulching, firewood, and more, call Foy Tree Service.
Serving Morgan County and surrounding area since 1987.
With top quality service and fair prices, we take pride in our work, and we do everything to make sure that you are a happy customer.
That's Foy Tree Service. Call us at 706-342-8733.
That's 706-342-TREE.
The Madison Trolley Company is Morgan County's newest 5-star attraction. We offer historic Madison tours year-round, a haunted history experience in the fall, and our Madison Lights Christmas Tour and Mary Maddie Express Adventure for kids have become new holiday traditions. Our private charters add vintage charm to weddings and special occasions aboard a historic trolley by day, party trolley by night. Find us on the Madison Town Square or get on board by visiting madisontrolley.com or calling us at 706-997-1800.
This is Andrew. I'm the owner and servant of Sweetwater Soft Wash. As the owner, I run this business to expand the kingdom of Christ. We use agape love and servant-based leadership to bring you first-class service at a fair price. At Sweetwater Soft Wash, we offer roof, house, driveway, window cleaning, Christmas light installation, and more. Text or call me at 470-902-5854 or at sweetwatersoftwash.com to get a quote.
Spring is right around the corner. New beginnings, fresh starts, and big moments. If you're thinking about proposing, if you're ready to take the next step, you go to P&A Jewelers. For 50 years, families have trusted P&A Jewelers to celebrate life's most important milestones. Proudly second-generation, family-owned and operated by brother and sister, we specialize in stunning engagement rings and custom designs made just for you. P&A Jewelers, located at 4665 Atlanta Highway next to Quick Trip in Loganville.
Roll-Off Systems of Statham, they're on a roll. They offer dumpsters in all sizes, trash compactors, porta potties, and new combo cans. Existing sites are new building sites. Trash and waste disposal, it's their business. Locally owned and operated. Call Roll-Off Systems today. 770-725-ROLL. That's 770-725-ROLL. Or go to rolloffsystems.com.
$10,000 off MSRP on select 2026 Ford Explorer STs and trimmers. It's just one of the deals through March 31st at Aikens Ford in Winder. Hi, this is Brad Aikens, and these Explorers also come with Ford's 10-year limited factory warranty and no additional charge. Plate number 40030, MSRP $60,795. Deed retains factory rebate plus government fees with approved financing through Ford Credit and your 1995 or newer trade. Ford's limited warranty is 10 years or 100,000 miles. See dealer for details. Visit us today at AikensFord.com.
Welcome back to the Marc McMain Show. Bob Furr here filling in for Mark on this Tuesday afternoon. We are talking to a couple of men who have given a great deal of service to their country here. Stratton, you come from a family of service. When I was doing a little research for it, your dad, your brother, and reading your dad's resume in the Army Air Corps in World War II was impressive. And I just looking at it, saying how you wanted to outdo your brothers. So submarines weren't it for you, right? What else did you do in the Navy?
Well, that's right. The good thing about being in the Supply Corps was I could specialize if I wanted to, or I could do a broad spectrum, and I wound up going the broad spectrum route. I spent 3 different tours with submarines. I was on the Alexander Hamilton, as I mentioned. I was in an attack squadron as the squadron supply officer riding attack boats out of New London for a few years, and then later when I was senior, I was the business financial manager for the Seawolf submarine program in Washington, D.C. So I was on the Seawolf, but it was still in big sections at the time. It was under construction. But in addition to that, I spent time on a guided missile cruiser out of San Diego. In fact, that was really my only combat experience, true combat, was I was in the Desert Shield, Desert Storm operations. But my closest experience with combat was being offshore, fighting the sand that was blowing off the beaches and keeping our filters clean as we supported the onshore troops. So we didn't have much of a real combat role other than interdiction ops. And then I was in Washington, D.C. for several tours of duty, as I mentioned, as the Seawolf Submarine Program Business Financial Manager. And after that, I went to Ballistic Missile Defense, where I was the Business Financial Manager for the THAAD and for the Patriot missile programs, and also the Airborne Laser when we still had that program, and some other programs that were now classified but also canceled because of budget constraints. So a little of everything in the military service as far as exposure. I worked for the Chief of Naval Operations for a while as a budget officer, doing the 5-year budget plans for the Chief of Naval Operations in certain areas of the military, the Navy. And because of that job, I was also exposed to classified program budgets, both for Navy, military, but also other programs that were related to the Navy. So again, a very broad spectrum. I'm a master of none, but I've been exposed to a lot. So.
And so, what are some of the most memorable things you've learned, seen, experiences you've had? Like when you look back on such a long naval career, there's got to be a couple things that stand out here or there.
Well, I think the thing that stands out to me is when I go back and visit friends that didn't go into the military, and you realize how much responsibility they give you as a junior officer and then all the way through your career. I was a department head on my first tour, responsible for a submarine that was underway with a bunch of enlisted guys that worked for me, and some of them had a lot more experience than I did. But as I progressed, the areas of responsibility and authority kept growing until I was, say, at Ballistic Missile Defense, working with flag officers, briefing congressional staffers, and you just don't get that in the civilian world. You're given so much authority and so much confidence as an officer. And I never became a senior officer. I retired as an 05. You can become an 010. And I was doing all this as essentially a junior and then a mid-grade officer. So it's incredible, the responsibility and the authority that is entrusted to you. And it's humbling, really, when you look back at your career.
One of the most interesting speeches I remember from Ronald Reagan was I think he was speaking at the anniversary of D-Day, and he's like, I wish I could remember the exact words, but it's basically like we get deluded into believing that these men storming the beaches were men in their 50s and 60s. The veterans that we see today, we forget that they're kids, and young kids. Tom, how about you when you look back on not just military, but your flying career, right? Because you went to work for Eastern Airlines. And
right.
I coached hockey with a guy who was an airline pilot, and he kept telling me stories about, you don't have no idea how many times we get hit by birds. And I'm like, yeah, and I don't want to. Stop talking. So just tell us a little bit about some of the memorable parts of your career in the military and your flying career.
Okay. Well, after my tour in Vietnam, the Army sent me to Fort Rucker, Alabama, to be an instructor pilot. I guess they figured I did something right, so could maybe teach others. So I did that, and then I actually left the Army, had a break in service, went back and completed my degree, and then re-entered the Army and continued to fly that. So
was that back in helicopters again?
At that time,
because you had mentioned to me something about you'd actually flown more fixed-wing aircraft.
Yes, yeah. I used the GI when I was instructing at Fort Rucker. I used the GI Bill to get my fixed-wing ratings, and the Army recognized that and gave me a specialty in airplanes, dual specialty, rotary wing. So whenever I came back into the Army, they tracked me in airplanes. I flew OV-1 Mohawks, twin-engine turboprop surveillance airplane used by military intelligence. So became an instructor pilot in that, and I flew that at Fort Hood, Fort Huachuca, and in the Georgia Guard. So while I was on active duty, I had a tour in Germany, 4 years in Germany, where I flew there. And then in the mid-'80s, I got out and I resigned my regular Army commission and went to work for Eastern Airlines. So I did that until they went belly up. And then I became an aviation safety inspector, and I did that for 34 years. So concurrent with that, I flew in the Guard at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in the Mohawks, and then in the C-26 VIP unit out there as a commander.
Spent some time in the air, it sounds like. So
yeah, I've had over 10,000 hours.
You're listening to the Marc McMain Show. Bob Furr on Q92.3. We are talking with a couple of men who have given their life to service. Tom McNamara with the U.S. Army, and Stratton Hickey, a former submariner with the U.S. Navy. In our last few minutes left, what are you up to now? So what is, I know you got, and I know because I know you, but I'm going to let you tell the story. So, Stratton, what do you do with your time now, and how do you enjoy? I think I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you are retired and loving it. If it was the right profile,
that's right. When we came back to Madison, I had 2 young daughters, and it was a great place to raise our girls. They have now gone off and they're adulting on their own. One lives in the Seattle area, and one lives in the Arlington, Virginia area of Washington D.C. area. And so now I'm on my own. My wife passed away in 2004. She fought cancer for a number of years and finally succumbed to that. And that's about the time that I sold my father's family home, was when she was fighting cancer. But when you are privy to, or when you're responsible for one of Madison's historic homes, there's always something to do. They look great, and then you go up and touch the paint, and you find your finger goes right through it. So there's a million projects like that, plus my hobbies, as I mentioned, the jukeboxes. I have a jukeboxes starting in 1955. I have a 58, a 59, a 60, and then a more modern one. But those are mechanical. They're always acting up, so they keep me busy. And then the cars, I've got a number of cars that I like to tinker with and take to car shows, as you mentioned. So there's lots of projects for me.
And you and your family played a big role in the furnishing of Heritage Hall, if I'm not mistaken, right?
When I sold my father's family home, before we had an estate sale at some point, but I invited all the local museums to come through the house and take anything they wanted, because I wanted to keep anything that they might be interested in local, and something that even my children could visit in years to come in a museum, rather than sell it and have it just go off to someone else. So Heritage Hall took advantage of that, and they got a number of pieces of furniture and some small things that were related to Madison history, and they liked the idea of furniture that had been in Madison since the 1800s, rather than just period pieces. So they replaced some of their furniture with things that we provided.
And that's so important. I mean, I drive people on the trolley past the outsides of the homes, and that's one thing. But to go inside and see how they live is another thing. And Tom, how about you? I know you do some flying of vintage aircraft, and I know that I was out scrubbing a historical marker thanks to you and Terry Tatum. So what do you got going on right now?
Well, ironically, I'm still flying the same type of helicopter I flew in Vietnam. I volunteer for the Army Aviation Heritage Foundation. It's a nonprofit. We have chapters in Arizona where I joined the organization, one in St. Louis and one here at Hampton down by the Speedway. So I'm an instructor pilot in the UH-1 and also the Cobra. I got qualified in Cobra attack helicopters while I was on active duty. So as a matter of fact, we have an air show coming up shortly at Vidalia. So I'll be there flying.
When is it? Get the plug in there.
I knew you were going to ask me that. I think it's later this month.
Okay, well, tell you what. You get me that information when I'm on next Tuesday. I'll do a proper plug for
Okay,
it.
all right.
So.
All right, good.
All right, well, guys, thanks so much for being here. Men such as these, right, Chastity? I'll tell you, here's the thought that popped into my head is everybody talks about the greatest generation. And I used to kind of always bum me out with my dad who fought in Korea, because you'd be, all the World War II veterans stand up. And, nobody ever said, the Korean veterans stand up. So we always talk about the greatest generation. There are great men in every generation, and we've had a chance to talk to a couple of them today. So thanks so much for coming in. I'm Bob Furr with Chastity Morgan. This is the Marc McMain Show. Until I get to talk to you again, keep it real, country.